introduce Bruce Cathie. I don't think he needs much introduction to a lot of people here. His books are on sale over there, and his work, I think, precedes him. So I'll leave you in his good hands, and enjoy.
Thanks, mate. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me for a start? I'm only a little bloke and I've only got a little voice, so if you have any problems, just yell out. And I'd also like to welcome you this morning, and I'd like to thank Duncan for the effort he's made to put this show on. He's put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it's a hard thing to do, to arrange something like this. I know from my end it wasn't easy to get here today. So anyway, I'm calling the talk today from UFOs to the Unified Equation. And I'm not an accomplished lecturer, so I feel much better in the back room just doing one thing on my own. So are you having trouble hearing me at the moment? Yeah, sorry. So I'll do my best to give you as clear a sort of picture as I can of what I'm doing. But first of all, I'd like to just read a couple of extracts here that I wrote just a while ago, which will give you enough of an overview of things, and then I'll start from scratch. And I have to use mathematics in what I'm doing to try and prove what I'm trying to say. Obviously, I'll probably confuse you a little bit at first with it, but as we go over and over, what I'll try to do is to show the sequence of values in mathematics that is the basis of all this thing. And the main thing I'll try to point out is the repetition of the same old values coming up over and over again. And it got to the stage, once I'd established the basis of my work, I could then start applying this to a lot of activity that's going around the world, and which is being accomplished by scientists. And it's obvious now to me that a lot of this information has been in their hands for many, many years. And I've actually checked back on their knowledge to as far back as 1100, which means that this has been around a long time, and it's been around before that. And other evidence even puts it way back before Chinese history, the same mathematics that I'm going to show you today. So there's nothing new. I haven't found anything new whatsoever. I've just started finding out what a small group of people in the world have already known. There's always been this group here. They've never been away from the place. This knowledge has always been known by that group. The only reason it hasn't been used until these days is they didn't have the technology to back it up. But now we've got to the stage where the technology is here and they can start using it. So I'll just read these two bits to start. In my books, I've stated that all the evidence pieced together over the many years strongly suggests that modern-day scientists have discovered the secrets of anti-gravity, travel in space-time, which makes possible journeys to the most distant stars, the geometric structure of matter and antimatter, the tapping of energy from the Earth itself at almost no cost, transmutation of the elements, disintegration of matter by use of laser or light beams, and these can be made selective, and almost instant communication between any number of points on the Earth's surface through the Earth itself, a myriad of other technical wonders. All this is possible today. In one great surge of progress, the whole world could be transformed into a material wonderland with plenty for all. Now, several years later, my further researches have only helped to strengthen these statements. Small bits of information are beginning to leak out into the public domain, particularly that relating to laser research. But generally, the most advanced knowledge held by scientists is not being released for the use of the welfare of the whole world community. There are many reasons for this, but I believe that a comparatively small international group is behind its suppression. They do not wish the knowledge to be made freely available, because this would alter the concentration of power and allow the less fortunate countries to control their own affairs. I believe that this situation is slowly changing. The public are becoming aware that they are being conned and are starting to demand the truth. Modern communications are making it more difficult to suppress knowledge that the subtle brainwashing techniques used to sway public opinion are not working as well as they did in the past. The younger generations, with their more idealistic outlook and superior knowledge, are beginning to take over control in the political and scientific fields, and hopefully they will learn wisdom as they progress and change the direction of world affairs, from the hopeless future we face today to the situation more worthy of the human race. I'm optimistic. They will succeed. although the going will be rough at times. The only alternative is oblivion for all of us. I'm sure that this is a lesson that is becoming more obvious as time goes by. Now, I wrote that a little while ago, but I think it still applies. And in the last year or so, I have been contacted by the younger scientists. And it's got to the stage now that we've got a working relationship. And we're trying to accomplish something with the knowledge. And this is other extract here is just a general overview of how I got into this and what's happened generally over the years. So I'll just read this and then we'll get into the other stuff. My life changed dramatically in 1952. This was the year when I saw my first UFO. The object was hovering over the Manukau Harbour, Auckland City, New Zealand, in the early evening twilight, and carried out manoeuvres that no known man-made vehicle could accomplish at that time. The thing, whatever it was, had an intensely brilliant white light with a small glowing red light some distance from it. And from about 20 minutes, held myself and other witnesses spellbound as I went through a series of riding off turns and disappeared straight up into the clear evening sky. Ever since that time, I've collected every bit of information available on the UFO phenomenon. During my thousands of hours of flying, I've searched the skies constantly and been rewarded with many other sightings. As time went on, I was informed that many other airline pilots in New Zealand, by the pilots, that they too were sighting objects for which they could find no explanation. It became obvious that either we were being observed by some sort of advanced vehicles coming in from outer space, or that some scientific group on Earth had discovered a principle of physics unknown to the rest of us, and that secret research of some maker was being carried out. I am now sure that both views were correct and that much has been kept from the public. Over the years, I've studied a great deal of material published by other investigating groups and came to the conclusion that no real progress could be made in discovering the purpose of UFO activity through this means. The main body of investigators have confined their activity to collating masses of sighting reports, filing them away, and doing nothing else with the information. And this is a fact. I tried to use all sorts of means of getting information so I could use this stuff. And if you check a lot of these groups, the better known ones, all the information goes in but very little comes out, and they don't try to do anything with it. And I think that's wrong. I decided long ago that the only way to tackle a problem would be to plot all the areas of activity and try to find some logical mathematical order in the hovering positions or flight paths of the unknowns. To this purpose, I studied the methods of a Frenchman by the name of Amy Michel, who had also endeavoured to find a mathematical order of this nature. He had had partial success and managed to find several track lines with equally spaced activity in the European area. Just when he appeared to be onto something, for some unknown reason he abandoned this line of research and publicly proclaimed that nothing could be accomplished by this method. And that's made me wonder too, now why did he suddenly stop? Because in those days there was a lot of pressure on people like him and me and others to not to progress in those areas. So anyway, I considered that there was definite logic in his findings and decided that I would carry on my own research using this basic method. But I struck gold. And ever since I plotted the first 2 track lines at right angles in the New Zealand area, I've continued to progress and advance my scientific knowledge in areas which otherwise normally would be completely foreign to me. Along the way, I've taken much flack from the academic world and from those who profess to know all the answers. That is in public. But behind the scenes, there's been a different story. Over the years, I've had many direct communications from members of intelligence organisations, top scientific circles and government agencies, wishing to know what my latest findings are and requesting copies of certain parts of my work. Once I'd established the 2 track lines, I was able to form a complete grid network over the whole of New Zealand area by gradually plotting onto the map the most reliable UFO sightings. The pattern consisted of lines spaced at 30-minute intervals orientated just on 6 degrees displacement from true north. Eventually, 2 similar grids were found to be interlocked with each other, creating rather a complex pattern which could be further reduced to lines with spacing of 7.5 minutes. The next logical conclusion was that I had discovered a small section of what could possibly be a world system. The question then was how to transfer the small section onto the world sphere and accurately align it. It was then brought to my notice that a strange area-like object had been photographed by chance on the seabed off the west coast of South America by the survey ship Tannen. Has anybody heard of that? I'll describe it after I get going on the other bit. The object was 2 to 3 feet high and had 6 main crossbars. spaced evenly up its stem with a smaller one at the top. I'll draw it now. It was still about that high off the seabed. Now, that thing was 13,500 feet under the surface of the sea. And it was just a straight stem, and it had crossbars on it. A little one at the top and a series of 6 of these down it. And on the end of each one was a little wee knob, a little ball on the end. Imagine that all the way down. That was sitting on the seabed, and I managed to get onto the ship when it called into Auckland. And this is after I'd searched the files. It was actually published in one of our newspapers. That's how I found out about it. And I think it sort of slipped out. Nobody wanted anybody to know about it. So anyway, when the ship called into Auckland to requisition, a journalist friend of mine came with me, and we went on board ship and sort of talked our way on board the thing. And we got down below, and we managed to start speaking to some of the scientists down there, and we asked them about this thing, and they quite openly talked about it. And we said, well, what was it? And they said it was an artefact. But since it's got out into the public arena, the Smithsonian and everybody else, they're trying to say it was a plant. But they say nothing can grow down there, but there's no photosynthesis or anything, and it's impossible for it to be a growing thing. So this is when I really got stuck into things, and that gave me my next step. So I had a hunch that this could be the point that I was looking for, upon which to orientate the world grid, if in fact one existed. I spent some time constructing grid patterns on a plastic ball until I found a system which could be transferred onto the world's surface and aligned with the aerial type object in the section of the grid discovered over New Zealand. I found that the patterns matched and felt sure the global system was almost a certainty. And the next step was to find the mathematical basis for the system, and this proved to be a long and arduous job, and it took me years. And I didn't have calculators or anything those days. All I had was pencil and paper and logbooks. And it took me 6 months to crack the first figure. I actually woke my wife up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she wasn't very impressed at the time, actually. But after all that time I was excited. I knew what I was looking for, but I eventually cracked through, and it was from that point I started getting further on with it. So after a study of all available information on UFO activity, I come to the conclusion that the speed of light, mass and gravity acceleration values must have some connection with the grid structure in order to explain the extraordinary manoeuvres carried out by the strange craft. The basic grid structure was formed by a series of great circles interlocking at various points around the Earth's surface. Nodal points of grid points when two series of small and great circles form what I've loosely termed polar squares around the north and south geographic poles. I've got diagrams that we'll show on the projector. You can put those first two on. Thanks, Bob. That's the... we'll come on to that once I finish this little bit here. And that's showing the first track line I found down the east coast. And that's when I established, using other investigators' files. And I picked the UFOs out of their files that were stationary over points. And then I also used information from our own control towers and radars. But, and finally, after years of work, I discovered that I could formulate a series of harmonically unified equations which indicated that the whole of physical reality was in fact manifested by a complex pattern of interlocking waveforms. I gradually found that the harmonic values could be applied to all branches of scientific and atomic research. At first I was not very sure of the results I was getting, but as time went by, more and more interest was being shown by intelligence agents, government personnel, scientists in the work I was doing. But the help in my work was eventually offered from these quarters, but the catch was that I had to remain silent about my discoveries. This I refused to do, and I still continued to battle on my own. Once I realised the importance of the material in my possession, I considered it extremely dangerous for a small group of people to have complete control of it. Now, it was in those days, this is over 17 or 18 years ago, I was actually taken into a government department, and I was locked up for 3.5 hours with, I think there were 2 of the top mathematicians, scientists and intelligence people. And at that stage I didn't know very much. But they kept me talking, and while I was talking, the mathematician was writing what I was saying into pure mathematics on the blackboard in the room. It's only a little small room, and it was all bunched in there. And when we'd completed all these talks, I asked the top mathematician there, because I was sort of beginning to see things and what I was finding, I said, is there such a thing as the fourth dimension? I said, with these equations and that I'm sort of coming towards there, I'm sure there is such a thing. And he just grinned at me and he says, here we work in 15. And that was over 17, 18 years ago. And he intimated that their mathematics at that stage could only take them into 15, but there were infinite dimensions and they were already into them. So there's nothing new. But I've never mentioned that before, but this is the first time I've ever said I was in that place. It was only a matter of time before I realised that the energy network formed by the grid was already known to a powerful group of international interests and scientists. It became obvious that the system had military applications and that political advantage could be gained by those with secret knowledge of this nature. It would be possible for a comparatively small group with this knowledge to take over control of the world, and this is exactly what they're up to. I've continually asked these people for valid moral reasons why the information should not be given to the world community, and so far no answer has been given, so I carry on publishing the material as I find it. Now again at this stage, I'd come across, after I'd done quite a bit of study, and I'd already published one book, and even at that stage I was threatened with my job as an airline pilot. I was told to my face by my immediate chief. He said to me, if you publish that book you're going to get sacked. And I said, fair enough, but my private life's my own and you have no control over me in my private life. And I took the risk. And luckily as time went by, it took me about 3 years to get out of under the cloud. But something else happened, I'll tell you later, that sort of took the heat off. And eventually it turned around the other way and they started helping me. And so it all turned out all right, but I did take the risk. And this is why no other pilots around the world talk. Because the pilots even in New Zealand and at that time and before that time, there'd been sightings and the pilots had been taken down and told to wrap up. And most pilots are dead scared to say a thing, particularly in the States and other countries around the world. New Zealand is probably one of the better places. And that's probably where I got away with it without losing my job. And I spent another 20 odd years still flying. But they're pretty hard on people if you get out of line. Once you start finding something specific and means something, immediately they zero in on you. And in the early days, I did have 2 death threats. But after the first one, luckily I was asked to do a TV interview, and I mentioned this on TV, and I thought it'd take the heat off, which it did. So, but since that time, I've had no bother at all for years now. At least 20 years, I've been okay. So one of the most startling facts I discovered by application of grid mathematics was that an atomic bomb is a device based on the geometrics of space and time. To be successfully detonated, the bomb must be geometrically constructed, placed on, under or over a geometric position in relation to the Earth's surface, and activated at a specific time in relation to the geometrics of the solar system. Now, that took me a while to work out, but I've got absolute proof of that now. I found it was possible to pre-calculate the time of various bomb tests and the locations where it was possible to explode a bomb. When it became known that I had discovered this well-kept secret, I was offered a position by the Central American Intelligence Agency. And I'll tell you that story later, but I had direct contact with an agent for about 18 months, and we used to communicate quite often weekly, and he told me quite a few things actually along the way because they were trying to sort of soften me up to suck me into the system. So anyway, the offer was very tempting, but I decided that I could not sign my freedom away. And after 2 days, I turned it down. I didn't turn it down straight away. I was tempted. I admit it, because they had the information that I wanted to get into. But after really thinking about it, well, I realised that all they wanted me to do was sign the thing and then just wrap me up and pack me away somewhere. And myself and my family would not be able to do a thing from that time on. So I said the offer was tempting, but I decided I could not sign my freedom away. And after 2 days, I turned it down. According to the mathematical complexities of unlocking the geometric structure of the unstable material consisting of a bomb in order to create a sudden release of energy, I realised that an all-out atomic war was an impossibility. Both sides could pre-calculate well in advance the time and position of atomic attack, plus the fact that only certain geometric locations could be devastated anyhow. A logical war cannot be considered under those circumstances. This could be the explanation for the proliferation of conventional weapons in modern warfare. Well, if you check what's been going on the last few years, you'll find that Russia has been increasing its conventional weaponry. And both sides have they actually used the atomic bomb threat as a political weapon. And if you remember years ago, China called America a paper tiger because they also knew the secret. They'd started doing their own tests, and they knew that the atomic war threat was nothing. Conventional warfare is the threat, or germ warfare, or any other type of warfare. It's cheaper and more practical, and it's probably got just as good a result. So all the atomic testing and everything they're doing today, from all the evidence managed together now, has got nothing to do with the war at all. It's purely very, very highly advanced scientific research into the structure of matter, and all the information they're learning is giving them the background to and the knowledge to get out into deep space. They're already out there now, but I don't think they can get out into deep space yet. They're around the solar system. And we're being told that they've been on the moon long before the first rocket went up. And you probably yourselves, you've heard the rumours and read the bits and pieces that are leaking out, that when the astronauts got up there, they were already sitting around the crater out there. So nothing's new. Another application of the grid is in the production of energy. Now this is the biggest thing. There's absolutely free energy available right now, and it's already been checked. Tesla did it in the 1930s and proved it. But they got rid of him very smartly, and he died a pauper. With the right know-how and with a comparatively simple apparatus connected to a ground aerial system, an unlimited amount of free electrical energy can be tapped from the Earth grid network. The international interests connected with the control and production of energy would certainly not want the public to become aware of this. There's no such thing as an energy shortage. We don't need oil for energy, we don't need anything else. It's there, you're surrounded by the stuff and you're standing on it. And every time a raindrop touches the Earth when it's raining and splits, it imparts a static charge to the Earth. And the Earth is like a big capacitor, and all you've got to do to use it is to start oscillating. It's already there, you're standing on the stuff. Trillions and trillions and trillions of electron volts is there to be tapped. And they know how to do it. Another competitive field where the harmonic mathematics of grid can be applied is laser research. Apart from peaceful uses of laser beams, which are many and varied, the military application is considered to be more important with those in control. Most of the advances in this type of research has never been made public. A whole list of scientific areas could be shown where this new knowledge could be put to use without stating the obvious application that would transform our communication and transport systems and give us a means to reaching the stars. It is not right for the public to have this knowledge, I was told. It would not be good for them. I'm sure that most would disagree with that outlook as I do. I am only one small voice. It is up to the scientific community themselves to open up research in all these fields in order that all mankind can reap the benefits. Now, I still abide by everything I said here a few years back. And, but I'm still sure right now that the public are becoming aware they're being conned. There's all sorts of things leaking out. And if you keep your ears open and read and buy everything you can find that it's got some sort of a bearing on this, you get little snippets of information. But the thing is to start putting it all together. And the various times, a few times I have given a talk anywhere to smaller crowds of people, I always say, don't believe a word I tell you. Treat me as a liar, but I do say, check everything I tell you and get out a calculator and try it for yourself. And then start looking around to what's going on around you, and you'll find there's all sorts of things being built on the ground that you can apply those mathematics to if you really look into it. Anybody with a basic knowledge of mathematics can find everything that I'll show you today and tomorrow. And I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a physicist, I'm not anything, I'm just an ordinary guy on the street. But I've found that as I've gone along, I've had to teach myself just little various bits, and I only know what I have to know. A real mathematician run rings around me, I'm in kindergarten. But I've just picked out the areas where I can feed into this sort of stuff. So I'll just start off the talk itself with, I'll just tell you a few things that happened to me when I was flying. Now my first UFO, as I said, slightly was 1952. Now I was on my way out to the local airfield. It was just a paddock those days, and this is where Auckland Airport, International Airport, is built. Now it's the old paddock we had with tiger moss and things all disappeared, and you wouldn't even know where it was. But not long before I got to the airfield, it was in the evening with a clear sky, no clouds whatsoever. Suddenly, just out to my right there, I saw about 2,000 feet over the harbour, gigantic white light. with a red light just to one side of it. And so I knew immediately it wasn't aircraft. There's no way. So I rushed out the field, and I got 9 of the other members out, and we stood watching that thing for about 20 minutes. And it sort of just hovered there, and then it dropped vertically down and went the one way, stayed there, and at the end of 20 minutes it just sort of went flash and went straight up. And I swear that thing was doing thousands and thousands of miles an hour and just went up and just disappeared into the stratosphere. So that was when I knew that UFOs are real. And I, being a curious sort of a guy, I got really interested and wanted to know more about it. The next sighting was when I was flying a DC-3. I was only a co-pilot then. And we were, I don't know whether you know New Zealand very well, but we were going to Wellington. We were about here. We were flying south. And when we were about here, we were both sort of chatting and looking at the front. And coming this way, we saw just that way up in the stratosphere, it must have been 50,000+ feet. The most gigantic thing I've ever seen. It was just a great big pale green sort of a shimmering disc. And the captain was a bit startled because he didn't believe in any of this stuff either. He's one of these new sort of guys, and we both sort of sat there spellbound watching this thing, and it was a great big disc. And it was so big, we were about 80 miles away from where it was going across the straits there, and it actually had a pretty vapor trail coming from each side of it. That's how big it was. And as it come down, it sort of come down an arc like this. And it also ended up right there, where this one come down from the north. Now these were quite a time apart, years apart actually. And but when it was about here, directly in front of us across Cook Strait, there was 2 driplets coming out of it like that. Now anybody that knows anything about bodies in space and meteors and all that sort of thing would know that if that things come out of that thing, they would have carried out a parabola like that. They would have gone down like that. But these things could just come straight and went straight down. So I knew that whatever it was, that's not normal. It had to have some sort of control. So after I got home, I did a few calculations, and the calculator, that thing must have been at least 2,000 feet in diameter for us to see it the way it was, see the 2 vapor trails off the sides from about 80 or 90 miles away. And that was one of the best sightings I saw, and that was what helped me to start off with that, as I'll show you in a minute. And after that, 1957, I saw 2 green fireballs that have been mentioned in many UFO books. Nobody really knows what they are, but they seem to think they've got something to do with sort of a coppery thing. And they're sort of put in for some reason, I don't know. But they're quite spectacular too when you see them, when you're flying above cloud at night on a dark night. And then suddenly 2 of these things pop out of the stratosphere and come down in front of you. And it was quite spectacular. And then another, in 1965, was the sighting I had that started me off, and that's the point I started everything I was doing. Now, I was positioning a DC-3 on a ferry flight, going from Auckland up to the top of New Zealand, and we were actually, I'd taken off. We used to operate from the Air Force airfield up to the top here those days, and we're going up where that USO stayed at the top there. We took off here and we're going up. I was going up the coast and going to just sort of have a visual figure. And as I was going across that little inlet, ahead of me, just to the left, I noticed something in the water. The tide was out, the estuaries were pretty low. There was only about 30 feet of water, and it was very clear. And I saw something on the bottom I thought was a whale that got stranded in there. So I didn't say anything to the other couple of guys in front there, and I just sort of veered over and had a look over the side. And there was a thing sitting in the bottom of the estuary, and it was sort of a real teardrop sort of thing, really streamlined, just like that. And it had a sort of a thing there, looked like probably where you get into the thing. And I'm just sitting there, pointing south. And so I took note of it, and I realised it wasn't a whale. It wasn't a submarine. It had no fins on it or anything. That's all it was. So I just carried on flying up there and took a note of it and didn't say anything. But after a few days I thought, oh, I better tell somebody. So I rang up and let the Navy know, and they weren't very happy with me at all. They said, well, why didn't you contact us straight away? I sort of thought, you just laugh at me. And they said, no way. and that they were pretty unhappy about the whole thing. So not long after that, I sort of had contact with an agent. Well, he took a boat up there with an echo sounder, and he checked that area where said I'd seen this thing. And he found there was actually a hole in the harbour bed where that thing had been resting. So it was about 100 feet deep and a quarter mile wide since that thing had been there. So whatever it was up to, it had left some evidence that it had been around. So that's the position where I started off all my calculations, because I knew I'd seen it myself, I knew it was there, and there was evidence that it had been there. And before I go into that again, I'll just a couple more sightings here. In 1970s I was on friendships and as a captain. There was another ferry flight. We were going home. Fairly late, was about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And we were again in the south here. We were coming out of Wellington. We were about here. And just sitting here it was a sort of a moonlight night, and there was a level cloud cover, just a layer of it. We would probably be about 8,000 feet, and the cloud layer would be about 5. And sitting on top of the cloud was a monstrous big ring of lights, and sort of just dotted around, like that. And we were about 50 miles away, and that thing was just sitting on top of the cloud, and not moving or anything. So co-pilot looked at each other, and we just sort of swung around. We just started heading for them. And I suppose we got it within about 20 miles, and the thing just sunk down in the cloud and disappeared. I knew we were coming. So that was quite one good one at that time. But the most startling one we had was a few years later. And again, we were coming up that same area, and we were, again, there's a lot of activity around that area. We were coming out of Wellington, and we were late at night going home, 10 o'clock at night, and it was pitch dark night, no moon, no cloud or anything. And there's a little township here called Eltham, and we're about here, and Co and I were talking quietly, and we're looking ahead, and we thought, oh, there's Eltham ahead of us, no problem. And then about 3 or 4 minutes went by, and then suddenly we realised all these lights are coming towards us, and sort of like this, just strung out in front of us. And then suddenly we realised they were going at enormous speed. And there was no use us trying to avoid them. It was a head-on attack. So we just sat there, and when we realised that they were moving, we sort of dinged the bell and got the hostess up. The three of us were just sort of spellbound, watching this lot come towards us, wondering what was going to happen. And it ended up, they went below us going the other way, just straight underneath the aeroplane, about 1,000 feet below us. So they already knew what I was up to, all the airways and everybody else in the country. So I just looked at the co-pilot and said, I'm not going to say anything, you do. So he picked up the microphone and called up the control people in Wellington who were covering the whole of the North and South Island that night, and wanted to know what other traffic was around. And they said, well, what traffic? There's nothing in the air, you had only one. And they tried to get more information out of it. We gave them just not too much, but enough to let them know that something pretty drastic had happened to us in the sky. And when we landed at Auckland, all hell had broken loose over the whole country. They were checking everywhere to try and find out where these things were. So that's on official record too. So as all those things were happening to me and other pilots, and I was the only one that started talking. I was the one behind the 8 ball, all the other guys just kept mum and just fed it to me all the time. And as I was going up and down the country, the radar people in Wellington and Auckland to call me over every now and then as I passed through and say, oh, something's happening, and all this sort of thing. And the guys in Auckland were pretty good. I'd already established that map, and I use that all the time. And they said, bring your map out, we might have something for you. So I went out that day, and they said, oh, we had three unknowns on the scope last night, and give us a look at your map and we'll plot them on there for you. And they plotted them on the screen, and we transferred them to that map. And the three things, there was one on that one halfway there. And during the time they were watching them on the scope, there was a Viscount coming north, and they got up here and they tried to vector him over towards them, and he started to go over them, the three of them just vanished off the scoping heap. So over the years there's been a lot of activity in the New Zealand area. I don't know how it's been over here, but there was one a freighter going across Cook Strait to Wellington, and this was broad daylight, 10 o'clock in the morning. And there's a great big blue ball sitting about halfway across the Cook Strait there. And they rung up the freighter captain and asked him if he'd veer over and have a close look at it. He says, like hell, he wouldn't go anywhere near it. He just kept paddling across the Wellington. And on the way back, the thing was still sitting there. And eventually it just was probably there for about an hour, all told. But none of the other aircraft would go near it. They wouldn't have anything to do with it. I thought, God, I wish it had been me. I would have been close as hell. You know, as close as I could get to it. So all those things were going on. But anyway, back to these track lines. I was asked by another investigator. He gave me all the information and asked me to plot this thing. So we got that pretty accurately on the map. And then this other one I saw in 56, I was pretty sure that it would be at right angles. So I plotted it at right angles. I thought, well, I'll assume it's at right angles and see what I get. And it took a lot of sort of shifting fractionally until eventually we got it in. And then that's what happened there. And then we come to the area on the seabed. So, Bob, do you mind putting, what have we got on? Here, another. This is a pattern that I constructed on the plastic ball. And I spent a whole week just drawing patterns on the ball until I got the one that looked good and might fit. And what I did, we had this thing on the seabed that I could get one position of. So I calculated the opposite position in Siberia and then took that point there and the one in the south and hung it on those 2 points and then swung it round until that pattern fitted the section I'd found over New Zealand. And I found it fitted perfectly. It just slotted right in. So I could still only assume that I was right, but I carried on. After we'd established it, I started breaking down that section, this area here around the pole. This is on the North Pole thing, and this is the pole of the grid itself. And I took out that section, which I roughly called the polar square. It's not a square, it's made up of bits of great circles and small circles, but when it's laid out on a flat plane, well, it does come into a square. And started finding out just what those coordinates were. And I had to form then some form of mathematical concept, which would be a universal concept that you could use anywhere in the universe. And all our measurements, as you know, in all the textbooks, they use metres or feet or you name it. And they've got all sorts of measurements which confuse everything. So I had to try and find the measurements which would be applicable to this, and then I could take it somewhere else in the universe or another planet and it'd still work. And I figured the only way you could do that would be to find a geometric type of measure that could be applied to any spherical body. And naturally, the one to use would be degrees, minutes and seconds. And those of you who are yachties and do a bit of navigation or pilots will know that 1 minute of arc is 1 nautical mile, which is a valid measurement, even though some of the scientists try to talk me out of it and say I was stupid. But so I decided to use a minute of arc, and I found that once I started using that, well, it looked good, but I still needed something else, and that was time. And even though I used a minute of arc or universal measurement, well, the time didn't come out right. So I had to figure that one out, and it took me a long time. And we had a trial and error to find that the actual time base was on a 27-period base for one revolution of the Earth. And since that time, I've read another things that is actually a natural time base. And this came up, I think the French put some people down underground, deep underground for a few months at a time, and then found after being down there for a number of days, they started working to a 27-period time base, just naturally, because they didn't allow them any clocks or anything. They wanted to see what had happened. And they gradually worked into this 27 period. So I thought it looked like I could have been right. So I called them 27 grid hours, which are slightly shorter in time, and then cut those up into 60 minutes and 60 seconds, grid seconds, 60 grid minutes. And I've used it ever since, and it works. And I've applied that to bomb tests and work that's going on around the world, and it works. Plus the fact that the scientists are now checking what I'm doing and saying it's right. But now we are starting to If you put a number 5, Bob, that'll just show what it looks like on the world surface. Just have a quick look at that. That'll give you an idea what the... I found there was not one grid, there were 2 grids and then a resultant. And when they plotted, this was done by somebody else actually. Sort of makes a pattern like that. That's just what I call sort of the bare bones of it. But if you tried to really fill it all in, it'd be such a mess that you wouldn't be able to read it. And this is where I started getting the mathematical bits out of it, not knowing at the time what it really meant. Again, I don't even know today how I managed to get the values out of it, because it shouldn't have happened. And I'm wondering whether that grid actually gets rid of one dimension, because when you flatten that out, all the calculations differ to what you get off a computer if you're calculating in great circles. So if you take that polar section out, just imagine it's a square, and that's the north geographic pole or the south geographic pole, so you've got those coordinates there. Well, when I plotted that on the thing, when I was at the opposite side of the Altanan area on the seabed, I found that the displacement of the grid pole from the north geographic pole was 695 minutes. And the actual to the corner aerial positions go roughly around 2636. Well, after more work, trying to find out what these figures meant, I found that this was the reciprocal of the speed of light in geometrics in minutes of arc per grid second. This is a conversion from 186 to 282 miles per second into minutes of arc value. And this happened to be the square root of that. So I was getting near then to finding out what it means. And then one of the other grids, the actual distance down here was 2695. Well, eventually I found that was the answer to the unified equation. So these values were actually built into the polar segments of it. And another very important value is these to each corner aerial position, main positions here, which was 2545.5844 minutes. And it took me years and years, and it's only recently I found out what that value is. And it turned out it's reciprocal of the value that's directly connected with the Earth's magnetic field. And I read a book in 1950 by a chap called Frank Scully. It was an American book, and it was about a lecture given by the top magnetics expert in the country in the States during the last war. And he evidently gave this lecture in university, and he filled a whole blackboard with all this magnetic material, and there was evidently a great fuss about it. He sort of come and give a lecture, disappeared, nobody even knew who he was. He gave a false name, but they found out later he was this magnetic expert. And he put across at the time that the Earth hasn't got one magnetic field, it's got 2. There are 2 fields, and they're roughly at 90 degrees to each other. But one field, the number of lines of force per centimetre, square centimetre, is 1815, and the other field goes the other way is 1257 lines of force, so they're out of balance. And these 2 fields are going through, so I thought, well, it looks like what we read as the magnetic field is only the resultant of these 2 fields that are out of balance. We read the resultant of the field. But to connect that with the work I was doing, I had to find, again, something that would match the geometric part of it. So I thought, well, I'll have to extend these and work out what the cover is in 1 geodetic inch, which is 1/6000th of a minute of arc. So I calculated what they'd be here, and I found that the difference then between those 2 values was, I think it was 3928371 harmonic. Now, funnily enough, if you put 1 over that, the actual answer is 25455844, which was the distance between the poles of the grid and those corner aerials in minutes of arc. So I then found out exactly what that value was too. the spacing was the reciprocal of the difference between the two Earth magnetic fields. And so we worked slowly and slowly, and this is years and years of work, bit by bit. But before this, I started getting flack from the academics and the universities, and I said, Cathie's a nut, because he's using 1 minute of arc as an arbitrary value. The circle was cut up by man, and they cut it up into 360 bits. And it's arbitrary. It could have been 400 if they wanted to. So what I was saying was a lot of rot, because it can be disproved. And it took a while. I had to take the flack. I was getting answers, but I couldn't prove it. And then I read a book by John Mitchell called The View Over Atlantis, I think it was. And he had a piece in his book that he was talking about something else. It gave me the exact clue I wanted, and it was based on Pythagoras. Now, most of you would have heard of the theorem of Pythagoras, the square and the hypotenuse is the sum of the squares on the other two sides. It's a 3, 4, 5 triangle. And in the work I was doing, and the values for the speed of light, the maximum value was 144,000 minutes of arc per second. And I found out again, this is another part of the research, that I could ignore noughts and work harmonically. You could cross those off. And if the noughts this side, you cross those off, and you just use the block number itself. And this has been proved and is now accepted. But if you take a halfway, 72, harmonic, and multiply each one of these sides by 72 in proportion, you get 316, 288, and 216. Well, there are 360 degrees in a circle, there are 21,600 minutes in a circle, and 288 is 2c, or twice the speed of light, in harmonics. So I had the proof I wanted. The circle is not an arbitrary figure, it's been cut up to Pythagoras. And the basis is 360, 21,600, and 288, which is twice 144 2c. And the next step was to find out what the actual values I'd found before means and put them into some sort of equation. And this is where the 2c bit come in. Using the values I discovered, I'd worked out figured that I'd have to work out the mass of the Earth, and then I realised if I was using the Earth as one unit, I wasn't comparing with anything, I could collate the mass as its volume, and one could be the other. So I used the volume of the Earth and the values 2636 and the speed of light that I'd converted. And I've got a rough round figure of 143,890, or 14389. This is where I started getting into the real mathematics part of it. And I found, see that top lot there? In other words, Earth mass minus the square root of the speed of light reciprocal gave us the speed of light. So you come out the other way, and you could say that m equals c plus the square root of 1 over c. And I thought, well, the next step is to put that value of m into Einstein's equation, e equals mc squared, and take the m out and put that bit in. So I ended up with a unified equation, just e equals c plus the square root of 1 over c by c squared. And found that it worked. But I couldn't find anything really until I thought, well, I'd keep sort of doubling the c value and tripling it and see if I started getting answers, and I found that I only had to double it. And that equation, if I fed a particular value of the speed of light into it, which is being used now in electromagnetic transmission, I got the answer was 3928371, which is a reciprocal of that 2545 figure built into the grid system. So it works out perfectly. And then I went further, and I found that when I took the square root of that equation, I was getting the harmonic, which was from the grid pole to the coordinates, the 2695 I'd gotten the first time. But as years have gone by, that's slightly variable. It depends what speed of light value you feed into the equation. It can come from 2694 up to 2695, and just in a slight variation. So now that value is one they use for atomic bombs. I can show you that when I show you how they let the Hiroshima bomb off. So I had a full thing a full basis then for mathematics, but that can give us another step. And I wonder now, why is there a double cycle? What's the double cycle mean? Why do you have to double the C value? And eventually formed a theory, and now it's working, that if you take a wave, let's take one wave, you put those next ones on with the waves on there, by. If we, the scientists tell us that they admit now there's such a thing as antimatter, but they say that in our part of the universe is all matter, but some other part of the universe is antimatter. But they also say that if they touch each other, they annihilate each other. Just an explosion, everything disappears. But they don't say where the boundary is, because there's no such thing as empty space. So if matter and antimatter are two separate things, they must touch each other. Therefore they annihilate each other. Well, it can't be right. I figured there must be some other explanation. Well, and if that double cycle is true, both those cycles must be formed from the same wave motion. So I found, say, this is looking this way, this is spiralling through space. This is the nucleus of the atom, there's an electron here. So it's spiralling around it and going around in a circle. But it's also rotating this way. And if you imagine that rotating this way as well as it's going along through space, well, when it goes through 180 degrees, you've got these there. Well, this is going that way, but this is going that way, which is electron and then a positron, electron and a positron. And you're getting a pulse of matter or a quantum of matter on that half of the cycle and a negative one on that half of the cycle. But if you measure from that point there to the plus point there, well, that vector there is t, or time. In other words, the frequency rate of that double cycle gives us our time base, and it couldn't be varied. And this is how UFO works. What they do, that frequency rate can either be expanded and pushed out or brought in with a high frequency. And if you imagine that happening there, that expanding or contracting, that t value is expanding or contracting. And you can actually contract time to damn near zero by using that double cycle. And this is the secret of the UFOs, how they operate. They're using a double cycle, it is a natural double cycle system. And once you know the secret, you can design electronics that will do that and vary that cycle. I've got a note here. Just found an interesting paragraph in a book called Beyond the Occult by Colin Wilson. Quote, "There is a great deal to be said for this theory of other dimensions. At the very least, it helps us to break some of our bad old habits of thinking. There is an astonishing experiment in modern physics that helps to underline the point. Human beings are accustomed to the fact that if they turn round through 360 degrees through a full circle, they find themselves facing in the direction they started from. Not so an electron. By passing it through a certain kind of magnetic field, its axis of spin can be tipped through 360 degrees, which ought to restore it to its original position, but it doesn't. The electron has to be turned through yet another full circle before it behaves as it did before. We cannot distinguish the difference between the two circles. The electron can, which seems to suggest that the subatomic world, a full circle is not 360 degrees but 720, which backs up the theory of the antimatter cycle. It's a double cycle. But the antimatter cycle is not on our side of reality, it's on the other side. It's on the negative side. And I've likened this sort of theory to a strip of movie film. Our reality is not a constant reality. We live in an intermittent reality with pulses or quantums of energy. But in between each one quantum of energy on our side, there's a quantum of energy on the antimatter side, which explains that double cycle. And we cannot perceive the pulse on the antimatter side. If you think of a strip of movie film, it's exactly the same situation. You've got a whole string of static pictures. Now each one of those is a picture, but each time you just move a little bit. And if you can pick up a strip of that movie film and you can see the past, the present and the future. in one strip. But it doesn't move, it doesn't mean anything is not real. But if you pass that through a projector at 32 frames per second, you get the illusion of reality. In other words, this thing starts to move, but all you're watching is a lot of static pictures. Only they flash past you at such a rate you can't realise what they are. It appears to be continuous motion. Well, that's what our reality is. The same thing's happening. And it can, if you think of the antimatter cycle in between those strips, what they do, they bring one picture down, and there's a hesitation, and they bring another picture down. But it happens 32 times every minute, every second, I mean. Well, the same thing's happening in our reality, but it's happening at 144,000 frames a second, which makes it more fluid in motion. And we believe that we're living in that reality, which is constant, but it's not. We're living in a pulse of reality, and then there's an antimatter pulse, and a pulse of reality and an antimatter pulse. If you're on the other side, it'll look the same as the other side. You're looking from the other direction. So that's the basis of the whole of the science that's being used today. The next step was to completely unify everything. And we found the antimatter cycle, we found the harmonic unified equations. This has been actually admitted by when they tried to buy me. They want to get me out the way. The next thing was to find out how the electromagnetic field fits into this. And, how gravity fits into it first. And this is just the start, and I'll show you the table that eventually got to. And I knew gravity was in there, and I thought it was this 2545 figure, and I said that in my books. And I was right in the way because it is attached to it, but it's not a direct link. It's an indirect link. So what I did, I checked the textbooks and found out what gravity acceleration was in the textbooks at the Earth's surface. And at the equator, as you see there, it's 9.78039 metres per second squared. So now I had to change all that into minutes of arc values. And I'd already done this in the past, but the answers I got didn't mean much. Then I suddenly thought about, well, I'll go a bit further and find out what the value is if I change it into degrees per second, grid second squared, which you can see all the conversions, they're all textbook figures. And when I found, when I changed it into values that were directly related to degrees, which are 60 minutes of arc, it's just a larger measure, what do I get? 695, which is a reciprocal at the speed of light. And I immediately realised what I got hold of. Gravity actually is a reciprocal of the speed of light. So all I had to do there at that stage was take the reciprocal of the gravity factor, and I got the speed of light gravity on this side of the equation, which is in our reality. And just push it up a wee bit, Bob. If I added the harmonic of the reciprocal onto the actual value of 143,791, I got a factor of 143,860.9, which then changed back into textbook figures in the textbooks, gives you exact figure for the speed of light in air. So I knew I'd got the thing, and it fitted the textbooks. If I added 100 onto that 143,791, I got 143,891, which gave you the textbook figure in kilometres a second for the speed of light in the vacuum. If I added 3 times the reciprocal to it, I got exactly 144,000. So everything fitted, slotted, bang, 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 right on the button. And from that point on, I managed to produce a table which knits the whole lot together in one table. This is only to give you an impression of what it is. Can you read that? Some of you can, I know, in the front. But as you go down to the bottom, when you get to 90 degrees at the poles, you'll see that the actual value of speed of light changes. Up the top there is the gravity speed of light factor on our side of reality, but as you go down, see how it changes until you get to the bottom. The values, as it comes to 143, it changes inversely to the gravity acceleration. It also shows you, if you study that table, that the speed of light is not a constant. It's actually changing per latitude. So it's an acceleration. So you're equating 2 accelerations. But we believe it's a constant because of relativity. Because as the gravity factor changes and the speed of light changes with it, your time-base changes and everything else changes and your instruments change. So it doesn't matter what value it goes to, your instruments are compensating all the time. And you always read that top line. And it'll always be constant. Where in fact it is varying, but you can't read it. So, well, that is hooking it all in together on matter and antimatter cycle. Well, here is where that 3928371 factor comes in. These are the two fields that are out of balance. If you subtract one from the other, you get 3928371, which is the reciprocal of 2545 and it's built into the grid system and the poles. If you add them together, the two fields, you get this figure here. Now, this is, you'll find the figure, these figures are in my books, the variations of them. And if you add the two fields together, you get that factor there. And in my books, in using them and other, these factors vary as the gravity factors vary, I'll show you. But that's in various, up to 4116, 636. This goes up to 169444 as the speed of light changes and varies. And that's twice the speed of light. So you get to this part and you split them up again, and that figure there, as you'll see, is the value at the bottom of that table I showed you, where it gets to 90 degrees. The speed of light actually drops till it gets to that factor there. So, and then you can change it back then into the gravity value, which is down the other end, which is again textbook. And it's a fact, it works. So that table combines everything into a table that combines matter and antimatter, the Earth's magnetic field, speed of light, and gravity. This is another variation of that same table. And in my books, you'll find 16944, 26944. Well, this is the table using the 16944 factor there, and the 411636 there. Well, this one still remains stable. So even though these vary, that is a constant. And as you come back again from the twice the speed of light here, you split it up again into each side, matter and antimatter, when you come back to the gravitational factor, which comes back to your textbook figures. So that actual value, this 16944 value, is actually popped up on Mars, and I'll show you that later. And a lot of other things that are happening around the Earth's surface that the scientists are up to. And it's also used for communication, electromagnetic transmission and communication. So now I've shown you roughly the whole system, how it all knits together, how all the factors are there. It all fits the textbooks, and it can be used. And it's a secret of the UFO, because that's the basis of mathematics of it. This is out of the science books used in schools, universities. There's the actual values there of, that's the one that's in the tables here. Meters per second latitude, 0 at the equator. And you find this is right just on that figure at the bottom, because when we've calculated our table on the computers, we've assumed that the world is a perfect sphere, so that we can get a sort of an average factor all the way down. The variation is very slight. It's in the 10 or 100,000s, I think, 10,000. So everything we've got there fits the textbooks. It's only all I've done is converted them into geometrics. And it all goes back to Pythagoras, as I say, which makes it valid. Speed light factors in the textbooks makes it valid. And the work they're doing secretly, they're not telling you about, makes it valid because they're using the same stuff. Number 21, Bond, please. This is what I've done now is just taken out that top line, and I've made it a bit bigger so you can see it probably better. Oh, you want that thing. This, here's it starting off from scratch, the 9.78 metres per second squared. I've changed it in there to feet per second squared, then grid feet per second squared. What have we got there? That's minutes of arc, I think. Then come to degrees. And then we take the reciprocal of that, which gives you that. And then as you come up here, you find that if you add 3 times the reciprocal harmonic to the gravity factor, well, you get exactly 144,000. If you add the reciprocal to it, you get the speed of light in the air in geometrics, which can be converted directly into a textbook figure. You add 100 onto that, and you get that factor there, which is the speed of light in vacuum, which can be converted directly into the textbook figure. And then the maximum one of 144,000. And that just shows you more clearly that they all fit very well. This next line, I won't go too far into it, it's confusing enough, but when you come to this area here in the gravity part, there's something called the Lamb shift. Now, I don't know whether that, I'm still researching that, we haven't got the full answers yet, but the thing is that there's no such thing as absolute no motion. There's always a little bit of motion. You know, all over the universe, nothing ever stops. There's always just slightly shimmering. And they found that's around about 1,000 megahertz. Well, I found in what I've been doing that if it was just a fraction over that, they say around about 1,000. I got just over 1,000. And you can trace that right back to the gravity factor again. But in the stuff I'd read on it, it says that this American physicist, this perturbation is known as the Lamb shift, named after American physicist Willis Lamb. This work carried out in the late 1940s using techniques developed for wartime radar showed that the effective zero-point fluctuations of electromagnetic field was to jiggle electrons slightly in the atomic orbits, leading to a shift in frequency of transmissions of about 1,000 megahertz. Well, I found that if I used 1,000.684, the actual factor come to that gravity value there. And again, so and in the same article, gravity might be an effect brought about by changes in the zero-point energy of the vacuum due to presence of matter. So they're saying the same thing, that the fluctuation is caused by a gravitational effect. Well, that's where the gravitational effect comes in on the tables there. So I think we fitted it into the right place, but we can't prove it yet. That's a little bit further on. But again, if we added that 3928 factor to that one, we got 143,909, which if we put into the unified equation here, well, we come back with that 3928371 factor again, which is an electromagnetic field, the Earth itself. So it seemed to be fitting well. I'm working with a computer expert now, and we're actually using computer programs right now. I've got a set, and he's got a set that he's produced. And we can swap back and forth instantly from latitude, longitude, normal to grid latitude and longitude energy system just on computer. And we can check everything with it. So we think that will be the positioning we'll put into the computer programs. We're producing them so that we'll eventually put them on the market. And the program will be able to do all sorts of things with it, work out great circle tracks, and you can pick any point on the Earth's surface and find out what the actual grid value is and the energy factors and harmonics and the light values, and we'll have the tables in there and the whole works, and we're going to let it out. So I don't know if we get away with it, we're going to try. And if we get it on the market, anybody in the world will be able to check all this stuff. All this information I'm telling you today, I'm putting into another book. It'll probably be my last one because I'm getting tired. But, I think I'll have enough now to explain the whole thing. So if I found, I'm talking about that harmonic of 16944. Now, that's been popped up in all my books. You'll find that value, I think, right from the first book. I stumbled across it but didn't know what it was. And what is 16944 really, why is it used so much? And in 1928, I wrote in my books about the transmission they found coming in from space. That was on 34 meters, on 34. Well, when you turn that into geometrics, you've got 16944. And with the latest computer work, well, it's more near the gravity figure. But when you come back to phi, which is 1618034 constant, it's a maximum. It varies until it gets to that point, and it stays there. It just varies and goes around that point. If we multiply that by pi, which is 3.141597, put it over 3, you get 1694.4. 01242. So it shows that there's probably a direct connection there in mathematics, which is what's classical maths. All we're doing is multiplying the two constants and put them over 3 and you get the answer, which is 16944. And I've been using it for years and didn't even know what it meant. Now we come to classical physics, page 24. Now I've had, as I say, this battle with the academics saying, well, it's not classical physics, they don't match, there's nothing there. Well, I found a few little bits and pieces that help apart from Pythagoras. And the smallest unit of measurement in physics is the angstrom unit. It's 10 to the minus 10 metre. Now I found out when I played around with the metre that it is 3.24 geodetic feet, which I use. Now if we multiply by that by 2, take the square root, we get 25455844. So it appears that an angstrom unit is based on that harmonic. And if you process it a bit further, you can get 69444, which one over that is c, or the speed of light. So the angstrom unit is classical physics, but it's also this physics. All you've got to do is know how to convert it. So I'm more in good shape there. And if you go to the Coulomb, the number of amperes tells us how many electrons flow past a given point per second. Experiments show that if 6.25 by 10 to the 18th electrons flow past per second, we have 1 ampere. This number of electrons is called the Coulomb. Now, what we do there is change it into grid time. So we've got to multiply that by 8/9. And we get a value of 5.5555 repeating by 10 to the 18th. So if we take the square root of 1 over that value, we get 648, which is the same as that. The square root of that is the same as that, which is 25455844, which is the electromagnetic field again. So looks like the Coulomb can also be swapped into that value. And come down to electron mass, you see we start there with a given mass in the textbooks is 9.11 by 10 to the minus 31 kilograms. Now, you assume a full shell of electrons, total mass is that multiplied by 8, which is 72.88 by minus 31. But you also got to allow for the antimatter cycle and allow for the matter on the antimatter side, because the universe, it's there too. And this is another thing that's coming out. The scientists are admitting now there's a lot more mass out there that they can account for. They call it black mass. They can't see it, and they can't touch it, but it's there. They don't call it antimatter. They just say it's mass out there we can't account for. And they won't admit that there's antimatter there. So you've got to allow for that part of it too, so you double that. And you take the reciprocal, which gives you the 686. And in this harmonic mass, you can shift it up and down the harmonic scale by multiplying or dividing by 6. This is all from the circular measure, which is 666. And you get 411,636 near enough again, which brings you back to 169,444. So taking all the bits into account, well, you can come back to that harmonic again. So there is a connection there something. So that's just another thing to try to prove a point. I went into making any monopoles there, but that's a bit deep to go into, I think. So let's have a look at some other things that we can put this to. We'll take number 28, escape velocity. If you want to leave the Earth, you've got to go at a certain speed before you can break out of our gravitational pull, and they say it's around 25,000 miles per hour in the textbooks. Now I found that if I use 25,045 miles per hour, well, it comes right back to that gravity figure in 143,791. That's just another little pointer that these harmonics are very, very close to textbook figures, if not right on them. So we can reach those figures too all the time. This is showing Auckland City, and I put this map in harmonic 695, I think it was. And it showed you a map, and I plotted on it the places where there had been two massive explosions in Auckland City. One was by the police station, which is this one here, and there was another one away out our way where I'm living, and it blew a factory up. It was there. And those two explosions